All right, hello everyone. This is team assignment number 4, final group project. This is the lessons learned in project management. And for this project, we're going to be focusing on the Boeing 787 Dreamliner and also an HVAC manufacturing line expansion. And let's start on the next slide. So 2 complex projects, but a shared framework. This presentation is going to compare 2 pretty different projects. Of course, as we've said, the Boeing 787 Dreamliner and a manufacturing line expansion HVAC facility. So at first glance, these probably don't seem really related at all. One is for a global aerospace program with hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars invested at both the private sector level from Boeing and also with government contracts as well. And the other is a localized sort of manufacturing improvement project. However, as we analyze both of them through the framework of project management, we start to see that there are some, quite a few similarities. Find that 1, both projects are highly complex. 2, both have tight schedules. And 3, that there's going to be a lot of strong pressure from stakeholders to deliver these results quickly. In the case of the Dreamliner, Boeing attempted a pretty highly ambitious outsourcing strategy to reduce costs and accelerate production. Meanwhile, the HVAC project focused on expanding capacity and modernizing production equipment to meet a growing market demand. Now, despite the different scales, both projects are going to illustrate how project success depends on effective coordination, scope management, and risk oversight. By comparing these 2 cases side by side, we can get a better understanding of how project management principles will apply across industries and scales. Ultimately, the key lesson here is that the same core framework of planning, stakeholder alignment, execution discipline, and monitoring are going to help determine outcomes, whether a project involves a global aircraft program, such as the case with the Dreamliner, or something at least on a smaller scale in comparison in regards to HVAC manufacturing. Let's go to the next slides and look at the key stakeholders. So as with any project, one of the most important drivers of the project outcome is going to be the stakeholder influence. In complex projects such as these, stakeholders are going to shape priorities, timelines, and of course, some even technical decisions. With those expectations, or when they are misaligned, risks are going to compound pretty quickly. For the Dreamliner program, Boeing executives strongly emphasized cost reduction and schedule acceleration. Now, this led to an unprecedented level of global outsourcing. This was something that Boeing hadn't quite done before. And on top of that, Boeing was asking its global outsourcing partners to work with materials, in this case, composite materials and alloys, that these specific partners were not really familiar in working with. It also really meant that Boeing had much less control over critical components. Now, some suppliers, of course, again, lacked experience, and this introduced a lot of quality control and coordination challenges. In the HVAC project, the stakeholder dynamics were different, but still quite influential. Plant leadership focused heavily on return on investment and maintaining production output during the expansion. Operations managers prioritized safety and efficiency, while equipment vendors influenced the schedule through delivery timelines and installation requirements. With both projects, the key takeaway is that stakeholder pressure can help shape product decisions in powerful ways. So without a clear alignment and communication, those pressures can lead to unrealistic expectations, delays, and quality problems. And, I think that the big lesson here is that if all you care about is making money, and you are going to put quantity over quality, um, it's going to cause quite a bit of problems. And in Boeing's case, you'll find you'll probably end up losing money. Let's go to the next slide. So, for project management processes and the tools that were used, looking at the project management process involved, we see that planning was generally present in both cases, but the real challenges appeared during execution and monitoring. In the planning phase, both projects defined their scope and timelines clearly, which was fine, but the HVAC expansion included facility upgrades, new automation equipment, and an entire workflow redesign. This was all mapped out using planning tools like work breakdown structures and Gantt charts. And similarly with Boeing, they established a detailed structure and budget for the Dreamliner program. And of course, there was, both of which had to deal with a whole lot of regulations. So there was a lot of planning involved, as we can see here. But as we'll go on more, it's the execution that really fell apart. That being said, problems began uh, once they moved into execution. In the Dreamliner case, the extensive outsourcing strategy and working with these unfamiliar materials created coordination challenges between Boeing and its suppliers. Essentially, when all of the pieces arrived at Boeing's Everett plant in Washington State, uh, they were not workable. Things had to be entirely reworked at the line, creating huge bottlenecks at the sites of production. And in the HVAC expansion case, production targets increased rapidly, and staffing resources didn't always keep pace, and that created a lot of operational pressure during the rollout. Of course, as this shows, monitoring and control are always going to play a key role. In both cases, oversight systems were often reactive rather than proactive. Issues were addressed after they appeared, rather than being identified early through predictive monitoring. Finally, in the closing phase of both projects, there resembled a whole lot more of damage control than actually planned completion. The grounding of the aircraft, we saw a whole lot of, and also production stoppages required corrective actions that disrupted timelines and increased cost. We might, when you break it down, Boeing probably lost, millions of dollars for each plane produced, really end up creating a net loss for Boeing. And overall, the broader lesson for both of these is that planning tools alone are not enough. You always have to have greater contingency plans in place, and improvising doesn't always work. Effective project management is going to require continuous monitoring, clear escalation processes, and the ability to adapt quickly when conditions change. And we'll go to the next slide, and I'll pass it along.
Thank you, Tyler. On this slide, we're going to be going over the scope, schedule, and budget. For the scope crept in. And so for the Dreamliner, the objectives eventually achieved, but only after major cost overruns. Midstream production rate increased the expanded scope without resource adjustments. And for the HVAC expansion, intended scope included facility construction and new tech. Adjustments occurred during high demand periods, stressing the system. For schedule, the Dreamliner entered service years behind schedule. Outsourcing strategy increased integration complexity, causing cascading delays. HVAC expansion, the 36-month project timeline, tight deadlines, stressed employee availability and supplier alignment. For the budget, the Dreamliner, billions of dollars over budget. Early fuselage defects required costly rework at the Everett facility. For the HVAC expansion, 2.2 billion projected investment. Budget control relied on monitoring, but competing financial goals shifted priorities. The triple constraint verdict. Neither project achieves the ideal balance. The Dreamliner met scope but failed on schedule/cost. The HVAC expansion delivered a capacity but faced transition phase losses. All right, moving on to the next slide. Communication practices. What worked and what didn't. What worked was formal regulatory communication channels with the FAA, structured internal reporting mechanisms, documented engineering change management processes, regular stakeholder contact with the FAA, airline carriers, and in-house technical units. What didn't work? No formalized issue log with required executive visibility, no defined escalation matrix outlining the safety concerns much must reach senior leadership, insufficient transparency between engineering and executive leadership, competitive market pressure, distorted communication framing schedule took priority over safety, and limited cross-functional alignment on risk severity. The key insight in high stakes aviation projects, communication is not merely informa- information informational. It functions as core risks control mechanisms. Inadequate upward escalation of safety concerns represent a breakdown in formal communication governance. Final outcomes and long-term impacts. Both projects delivered value, but at a greater cost than planned. For the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, immediate outcomes. Entered service years behind schedule and billions over budget. Early fuselage defects required costly rework of outsourced parts. Forced reevaluation of outsourcing model, more insourcing, tighter oversight, long-term impact, set new industry standards in composite structures and fuel efficiency, several damage several damaged investors' trust and corporate reputation. For the HVAC expansion, immediate outcomes delivered capacity gains and improved cycle times. Installation delays and training gaps caused temporary productivity drops. Long-term impact enabled faster response to market demand and sustainability standards. Established continuous improvement practices for future projects. Shared lesson project delivered the greatest value when meeting scope and performance goals while also controlling downtime and costs. Both cases reinforce the importance of governance, structure, and supply chain management. All right, and now I will pass it along over to Clayton.
Thank you, Oscar. Okay, so looking over the lessons learned and best practices for overall this both projects. The first lesson for overall was the scope discipline. It really had to be set in stone and kind of be on key schedule from day one through completion. The work breakdown structure, however, it was in the 100% rule, really helped ensure that every task was defined and it prevented extra work from being added from, again, from point A to point B. Um, for both of these projects and in both of these projects, the scope creep contributed to one of the major problems throughout, which was the only major contributor that was in a negative aspect. Um, the second lesson that was meant to be learned here that really went well with us was structured communication. From the beginning, you have to really have that well-structured communication between every one of your members. Otherwise, you have risk and increase of more problems. The deadline's not going to get done. Other things within realm of reason will start to fall back, and you just won't make your deadlines. The aspects and topics will not get completed, and such forth and such forth. Will just when there are no clear escalation paths, important issues start to stuck at the middle management levels, and it just will really decrease values and importance of the project entirety, and this integrity will decrease. Um, allow problems to grow before executives that are aware of them, really, in general. Um, Thirdly, the organizations must align ramp ups with readiness. This would expand production and facilities only if it works with training, supply chains, and overall quality of systems that grow at the exact same time. More finally, the risk management must be proactive at all times. Again, to keep things with your team members, everyone you're working with, down to the last final execution path. You have to have everything in a proactive state to keep things on the progression. Otherwise, things will not be moving in a precluded way to have things finalized and completion. Waiting on these problems to occur may turn manageable risks like supplier delays into full more crises that will might execute the problem into a denies denying of the problem and the excla oh God, Lord, sorry, but will prolong the plan of action to be, extended out to further than use, or it could, damage the project all entirely. These lessons may not all apply to the aerospace, but in any complex, but it really all has a high risk of an industry all as entirely. I guess next slide. As of all the insights, the key insights for all this, one of the biggest insights for this case is that the failures were not mainly technical, really. Instead, they were largely governance and manageable failures. Um, First, the communication structures were in some ways more weaker than some. Without a formal escalation matrix, the critical safety concerns were never reached at the top of the leadership escalation value. Secondly, the leadership pressure to meet the more deadlines, or the more stricter deadlines, were often outweighed careful to evaluation of the risks. Or the planned risks of actions that could have happened throughout the project. In a complex industries, leaders must create a culture where raising concerns is always encouraged. Um, I guess thirdly, you see that the risk management process will be existed, but not were not always enforced. But that having said, having risk registers is not enough to begin with. They need to have clear monitoring standards and more escalation triggers than you have on to cover every single base that you might think of or could think of in a possibility of, there being a more risk factor and all the other aspects of something that could happen or something that could be far out of reach that just possibly might to have something insured. This would violate the AAA. Oh wait, finalize the changes to scope, time, or cost were made without adjusting the other constraints. That part would violate the triple constraint principle, which would guarantee pressure somewhere in the project overall entirely. From that saying, the overall aspect of all these insights, really, the Dreamliner case would show that the strong oversight and governance are just as important as engineering expertise in the large overall scale projects as a must. Okay, next slide. So far, this includes all three of us, Tyler, Oscar, and I, but I will speak for me personally as this right the second. But my main takeaway from this project as entirely was just I'd seen how important overall the risk management and system structures are in very large scale projects such as this one. Like the scope discipline, majorly, one of the biggest lessons of this importance was the scope discipline. When the scope is not clearly controlled or managed well, projects can really quickly experience a scope creep, which can lead to delays and cost overruns. Using tools like a work breakdown structure or the WBS, as we know, helps make sure that all tasks are clearly defined and accounted for. The proactive risk management, that was another big thing in this that I've learned. Instead of reacting to problems after they happen, project managers should always identify the risks early on and plan for responses ahead of time, no matter what, from anything from A to B. Um, this would always help organizations prevent small issues from turning into major project failures or issues or just anything to compete or to prevent the project from becoming a failure in general. And then the communication governance. Communication is also very, very, very critical in high risk industries like aerospace, healthcare, or logistics. Having structured communication tools like formal issue logs and escalations. Without those systems, organizations often end up reactive chaos where teams are consistently fixing problems instead of preventing them. From a career prospect perspective, me personally, I'm interested in roles that are focused in, risk analysis and systems management. So how to fix them and maybe possibly manage them into a space where they are more smoothed out. My more potential path could move from a project coordination into a risk analysis and eventually a risk specialist. Something where the focus is more improvising systems and preventing project failures. Um, but overall, this project showed me that the successful project management isn't all just about finishing a task. It's about controlling the scope, managing a risk, building a system, and that prevents problems before they even happen.
Thank you, Clayton. Um, Again, just kind of without going over a lot of the takeaways that Clayton went over, I think we all kind of had pretty similar takeaways in this. When it comes to my personal journey in project management, I've started personal projects of mine. My full-time vocation is a hospice chaplain, and so I've been working with some of the other chaplains in my organization and creating a chaplain formation institute, really just to continuing an organization that would provide continuous education hours for chaplains and other people that are interested in spiritual counseling. And also, music is a really huge part of my life. I started this past year a DIY record label. And so I found that overall, this course and this project has shown me that project management will help me to provide the language to bring order to chaos at times. It's great to have ambition. It's great to shoot for the stars, uh, but you got to have order. So things like a WBS, um, and other project management tools are going to help to you know instead of things just being all a bunch of great big pool of ideas, actually have structure and ways of achieving them. And then I'll pass it along to Oscar to close us out.
All right, thank you, Clayton, and thank you, Tyler, for finishing out the career takeaways. For me, it struck me early how much smoother things ran once we put real plan in place. Instead of assuming everyone knew their role, we spelled it out. Each person had tasks they owned. Meeting every week kept us aligned, not just busy. Taking turns leading meant no single voice dominated. Progress became visible only after those rhythms took hold. I am really glad for having the partners that I had throughout this course. Earlier this semester, I had a life-changing event. I had my baby earlier this semester, and so it was great that I was able to rely on Tyler and Clayton to kind of take initiative when I had kind of to delegate out those roles of taking on more. On the first couple projects, I wanted to take on more and I knew I could. But as the semester progressed, I was like, oh my gosh, I can't handle this. So progress became visible only after those rhythms really took effect. Having that set early kind of helped us transition throughout the rest of the semester. What surprised me most was how essential early scope planning really turns out to be. Among the methods covered, the work breakdown structure made the strongest impression, not just useful, but vital. Up until now, I saw projects simply as groups of things to finish step by step. Clarity shifts everything, starting with clear outcomes. All right, and then for my career roadmap, I am really keen right now. I work as a microbiologist in a quality control department for a manufacturing plant. And so I'm really on track to want to get some certifications through PMI to kind of kickstart my progress through project management. And hopefully I can go into operations management, lead a production facility, take on more projects, expansions, whether it be actual line expansions, HVAC, or just bringing on more people. That is something that I really look forward to. All right. And then for the last slide, we have our references. These are the references that we use throughout this project for our slides and also our charter. So this was a huge part of being able to use for resources. Does anyone have anything else? Any closing statements?
I don't believe so. Again, thank you, everyone here. for taking part in this project. Thank you to everyone for listening. We look forward to your feedback, and have a good night.
Likewise.
Have a good
Yeah.
night.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you everyone for a great semester. Hopefully, Doctor, you enjoyed our project, and thank you so much.